to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you, Irene. So, in terms of Texas, we have several teams and action groups that cover state, federal, Amarillo, city, and county. This is what one of these items is going to be tonight. Amarillo College and also Amarillo Independent School District and Canyon Independent School District. So we have teams, and we just want to love on these different categories and kind of be involved, kind of stand in the gap. A lot of us work 40 hours, 50, 60 hours, and what we strive to do as a group is try to fill in the gap and provide information. Hosea 4:6 says that my people perish for lack of knowledge, and that's all we're trying to do is get out in the community and fill that gap the best we can. We have volunteers already for an upcoming Memorial Day. At the War Memorial, they're having on the 27th. Got about 9 folks that are helping us out with that to help our veterans here in Amarillo. You know, we set up the chairs and things of that nature, the stage.
As a veteran, thank you for that.
You're very welcome. So if anyone wants to be involved in that, please reach out. My phone number is on here. We'd love to have you, and I'll explain more as far as the setup day and the breakdown, okay? As I mentioned, we have different teams. One of our categories here is Canyon Independent School District, and on that team we have Pat Bolander. If you'll come to the front. She come up. And she has a report on something that occurred, I guess, just recently, so she'll give us a quick little update on that. Okay, Pat, thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Hi, my name is Pat Bolander, and I had a special meeting with this assistant superintendent in Canyon due to the fact that we had received a message, I guess it would be called, from an outside person saying that Canyon schools still had pornography in their libraries. And so I am on the DAC committee at Canyon, and that stands for the District Advisory Committee. And we don't oversee the curriculum, that's called the SHAC committee, but I am a part of all of that. So the reason I called the meeting was because I wanted to just put a halt or blow it up, whatever needed to be done, if there is still pornography being purchased in Canyon School District. So it was explained to me that they have purchased a very expensive format that searches words in every book that is now being purchased. And so they have a list of about 200 words that are pornographic or, you know, unnecessary to be in books for young adults. And so that's how they got rid of a good percentage of the books. They do not have purchased a format to search for cartoons and drawings. And so that's how this particular 2 cartoon books got in. They are series 3 and 4 of this Harlequin, and they have just now started the nudity part in these cartoons. And so soon as the superintendent and assistant superintendents found out about this, they immediately went into action to find out how that got by. The words passed. They did not use the pornographic words. So they sent back those books, getting their money back, those cartoon books. And they're not yet sure if they're going to have to purchase the drawings or the photo search because it's very expensive also. So they're just gonna sit on this for right now. So that pretty much ends that conversation. I, having been in education, I have 2 master's degrees in education, and I was a state administrator in Colorado. And I've been here 4 years, so this is now my home roots. I came because my youngest son lives here, and they needed some help with their kids. So as on my other committee, the DAC committee, they're having this great discussion on how to start the day in the classroom and elementary and specific, and they were using some of the DEI. Now that'll ring a big bell with some of you. And so I determined that why not go back to the way it was when I was a kid. We started the day off with the Pledge of Allegiance. And so anyway, I presented this to the superintendent. And I said, how about begin the day in every classroom, in every school building at the same time over the intercom so that everybody is pledging allegiance to our country that we live in at the same time. And then followed by the Pledge of Allegiance to the Texas flag. And I think that they should learn to sing the national anthem. And my little granddaughter is 3.5, and my son, the whole family rodeos. So, man, she comes to attention even if the national anthem's on the radio. In her little car seat, she puts her hand over her heart, and she can sing the national anthem. But it's all in how you're raised, and we've got a lot of kids that don't do that. And so anyway, I will be in contact also. The next thing is in legislature that we've got to get back to the 10 Commandments. I mean, that's the majority of what's going on today is these young people are lost. They not only don't abide by laws, they don't abide by 10 Commandments or God or anything. And so they're going to look into that, but I first have got to meet with legislatures and try to get it back into legislation because it was last year and then it kind of faded away. I don't know what happened. Then I had worked with a program called Lexia after I retired from the state. And it's a program that helps kids that have difficulty reading. And most of them have what we used to call as a lazy eye. The one eye does not track with the other eye. And so thus it's very difficult for them to read. Sometimes it's labeled as dyslexia, sometimes labeled as lazy eye. But so many of our kids are just struggling to read because with this eye not working, with this eye, it makes the words bounce on the page. Thus they skip over 3-letter words, especially like but and the and that sort of stuff. And there is a whole program that's been offered to Texas, and this is it ends in October of 24. And so Canyon has already got that in place, and they're working on it. And so I feel very comfortable with what's going on in Canyon right now. And this last Monday night, they here again did not come to the public to get the vote for a new board member, the last one. And so they selected somebody, and I just hope and pray that he's the right selection, but I don't know him, and we'll see. But anyway, that's it. Yes, John.
Pat, I got a question, a remark and a question. First of all, commenting on that child pornography that was admitted into the Canyon schools. Can you all hear me? No? Can you hear?
Just press that button at the very bottom.
You can have this one.
That is the only question.
That- Well, okay, it's, I don't think it's working, but I'll speak up, okay? With regard to that child pornography, and that's what I'm calling it. I saw those pictures. They were gross, they were obscene, they were offensive, even to me. And how Lisa Hill, who is responsible for admitting that into the library, she had to see it before she bought it. I want to know if that woman is going to get a reprimand from the public school system down there for her actions on buying that material. There is no excuse for having that kind of material presented to our kids, our grandkids, in our public school system. Is she going to be reprimanded?
John, that particular series is on an automatic renewal when they come up with the next series, and that's what this was series 3 and 4. And we've had the series 1 and 2 in the school since 1998, I think. And so this was just a renewal thing that she, or anybody, there's libraries in every school, and these are, this whole thing is every school. So I doubt that one lady should take the brunt of it, but, I was a librarian in my spare time in a little town called Fowler, where we lived for TJ and I after I was widowed. We moved back to Southeast Colorado, where I was born and raised, and I redid the whole library. And there's no way I could read every book that came in. There's no way. And it's an impossibility. They have quit purchasing by the bundle, which is what they have been doing for the last 20 some years. Each grade level would have a bundle of books, approximately 60 books in a bundle. And those publishers put those pornography, those ugly ones, in the center. So by the time you get to book 30, you're just reading the title and going on and entering them in. And so that's what's happened. But now they have got all of that cleaned out. And now they're on top of the little comic book thing too. So, okay.
Well, thank you, Pat.
You're welcome.
And Pat's email is on here if you have any other questions that you want to address. I apologize for some that do have questions, but tonight is kind of relegated to Floyd and the water pressure and infrastructure going on there in the North Heights. The reason I got involved in this was I was going to a couple of meetings at the Cultural Center over there, kind of peppered throughout the last 2 years, and one thing I kept hearing was water pressure and some issues with infrastructure. And as I mentioned before, we have certain teams on here. One of them is the Amarillo City and the county, and I had a gentleman, Jesse Firmer, that's on that team, just reach out to Josh Kraft, and he, I think he just asked Floyd, what was going on, and we heard that there was a 10-year plan. And so we want to learn a little bit more about that 10-year plan. Tonight we have a couple of people that have historic data from just time-stamped, throughout their experience. And we have Mr. James Allen, we have Mildred Darden, we have Commissioner Warren Coble, and I think one more came out tonight. I apologize if I don't see you out there, but it's just something to bounce off with Floyd and kind of get some understanding of what's going on. And it's an interesting situation. I went to Paladura High School, and I didn't live in the Heights, but I heard some things, and that was, I'm 51 today, and I'm just trying to figure out what we can do to show some attention. We're all the city of Amarillo, and I know that some folks wonder, why are we doing it over in this area? Well, this is where my precinct is. This is where I work in. And I just believe in community connect. And if we can all get eyes on different situations in the city, then maybe perhaps some things will start to change. I don't want tonight to be, some type of, lambast or anything like that. A couple of months ago, we had Rich Gagnon here. We're speaking about smart cities and whatnot. And that turned out very well. But what we're here for is just to have communication and understand what's going on. So let me read a little bit Floyd Hartman, I got this off the website. If y'all read along with me, Floyd Hartman currently serves as interim city manager. Floyd leads the capital projects and development engineering, community development, water and drainage utilities, and airport teams. Floyd has enjoyed serving the public for the past 27 years in local government in the area, and the last 17 years serving the citizens of Amarillo directly. Floyd has an extensive background in water utilities and is proud to be part of a team that provides drinking water to more than 200,000 people. More recently in his career, Floyd has added oversight of public works, capital projects and engineering, development services, customer service, and special projects such as work in the creation of the Convention and Visitors Bureau. He serves as a municipal representative on the Region A Water Planning Group and as Water Utilities Representative and Chairman of the newly created Region 1 Canadian Upper Red Region. Flood Planning Group. Let us be very respectful and thankful for the time Mr. Hartman has put forth in coming to speak with us tonight. I'll give him a hand. Mr. Hartman.
Thank you, Alex.
Hey, thank you for your time.
Question.
Yes.
How much time do we want to reserve for down here for panel questions? So how long do you want me to go on?
If you could go for about 25, 30 minutes, and then we'll
Do
open
questions?
it up to the discussion team, okay?
Because I don't want to shortchange that
Yeah.
piece, okay? So, good evening. Does this one work? Does this one work when I'm,
You can get closer and see, but if not, you can use the other.
okay. I think this one's going to do better. But good evening, and it's a pleasure and honor to be here. So I've met many of you many times over many topics. Others of you I haven't met, and I look forward to that opportunity. Again, my name is Floyd Hartman. I appreciate Alex pulling this off, and I appreciate that introduction. One problem with it is it's dated. I just passed my 30th year, okay? So I'm not keeping up with my years on this, right? I've worked with some of you. I've been on committees with some of you. I think y'all know me that I'm committed to Amarillo, and I'm committed to the region. This is important to me. Amarillo's success. The topic has been a topic of concern many times. I'll start with the infrastructure and the water pressure. But I want to answer up front. James has always asked me the question. He asked me again. He'll ask me in a little while. What's the number one problem with infrastructure, especially in the North Heights? Funding. We all know that. So I'm going to get into that. But infrastructure and water pressure. First off, why was the North Heights constructed the way it's constructed? Think about where we're at. Through the 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s, till now, we have seen the advent of subdivision law. What does that mean related to the North Heights? When was the North Heights developed? Prior to the advent of our current subdivision laws. We updated the city subdivision law in 2016. I was part of that. What does that subdivision law do? That subdivision law today required water, sewer, drainage, streets, roads, everything to be installed for that community to get progressed to where they can sell the lots. Why is there a challenge in neighborhoods like the North Heights? This exists in East Ridge. This exists just to the east of us, around us in the old neighborhoods, on the parts of Polk Street, the old parts of Polk Street where infrastructure, the old parts of town that were developed prior to the 1960s were not subject to the same rules and requirements of subdivision law. In other words, the flow of hydrants was not a requirement when that was developed. If an individual chose a lot a block away, they had to run the water and the sewer to that lot independently, where now a subdivision, a developer puts all that in. So what does that mean for the residents? That means that back then, the individual lot owner had to pay for that. Guess what happened? That's why a substandard size main was put in. That's why a small main or an area wasn't served. And so in the Texas legislature through the 1950s, when growth expanded, 1960s, they started that. So these old neighborhoods now are the product of not having that. So what does that also mean? How do you get that funding to fix these problems? Okay. So to replace those lines or to add new ones, we have a policy development for a new lot. So you take a new lot in the North Heights that wants to be developed, our policies are such that the city pays for the first 100 feet, and then the owner of that property pays for the rest. That's not, first 100 feet is not much participation, okay, at all. So the neighborhood plans were developed, which are part of the comprehensive plan, and we double that. So we'll do 200 feet. But still in the big picture, if you buy a lot that doesn't have service, it's very expensive to run the water, sewer, and the streets and the alleys, okay? So there's a neighborhood very similar, or even worse off, right over here at Eastern and Grand, Eastern and 34th on the northeast side, that was platted in the early 1940s. And actually lots were given away at the Texas State Fair, and there's not a house on it. There's not a water or sewer line on it. You can look on Google Maps, the city maps, and it's over there. The estimate 5 years ago was it takes $25 million to provide that little piece of subdivision infrastructure. So you take that footprint, you put it on the west side of the North Heights, that's what it would take to serve the North, about $25 million. We're talking lots of money. And that's not even replacing the existing. So there's two concepts that I want you to understand about expansion. New sites is one thing. Replacement of the others is a different thing. So replacement, if you have service on a lot right now, water and sewer, roads, then the city does include that in the expense of replacement. So how many miles of water lines do you think the city of Amarillo has total? A little over 1,200 miles of water line. In my 20 years with Amarillo, we've replaced 40. Okay? And that's a lot compared to our predecessors. But do the math. What is the expectation of an asset? An asset at 100 years is extreme. That's the extreme end of a water and sewer main. So our whole system, this is a citywide problem on replacement. Okay? Hence why one neighborhood struggles with funding. There was a tremendous effort, especially in the East Ridge effort, on some 2-inch mains, right east of Palo Duro High School and in that area a decade ago. And there was some success there, but there's still challenges in that neighborhood. Our main replacement program is fragmented, obviously. If we had past 20 years and we were consistent at it, but again, I'll challenge you, in that 20 years, we got 40 miles replaced. And we still had a fragmented program. Prior to that, 0, because we have an aged system throughout. So you take that. So what is this plan that Jesse talked about? So I'm going to go a little quick because there's so much. So EPA. Anybody heard of the EPA? Yeah. They're one of your best friends today.
No.
He doesn't believe me, does he? Because staff and citizens trying to get this system replaced, we haven't had success. You're talking to the person who wants to replace this entire system. I am an advocate of that. And I want to start in the worst neighborhoods. Okay? What has been my roadblock? Funding. So a couple of things. And I knew this crowd wouldn't believe that EPA is their best friend. But the EPA has come out with a program. And that's the plan that Jesse's talking about. So the operators of the system, now my elected official, my other citizens, we have to look at, the EPA is forcing us, and it's a lead and copper rule. Have you ever heard of the lead and copper rule in the water systems? And go look at it on the website. by October of this year, we have to let the EPA know what we have in our system, what we know we have in our system. So if I had my computer up, I could show up my map on the North Heights. And I could show you there's 6-inch mains, 8-inch mains, 2-inch mains, 3-inch mains, and I could click on it and it would have data. Some of it complete, some of it not. When was the main put in? Could I go to the plans? How old is this main? So remember, one block could be much older than the next block because of how it was developed. It's fragmented, very little information. But this is what I have to give the EPA by October of this year. As a public water system, we have to give the EPA the information that we have related to the pipe type, when it was installed, what type of pipe it is, and does it fall into lead and copper, okay? That triggers in October. Now, listen to this plan. In October, that triggers another 2-year window. That 2-year window, we have to tell them what we didn't know on October when we say we don't know this. In that 2-year window, we have to tell them what we didn't know in that 2-year window. What the pipe is, what it's made of, does it have lead, and is it subject to that, okay? At the end of that 2 years, that's when we have the 10-year plan that we have to replace those pipes in that 10-year window. Again, it's forcing the funding to come to it, which is the first time in my career that I've had something that says that's it. Guess what? I haven't seen a pipe in the North Heights that doesn't fall under the lead and copper rule. It's going to be one of the primary targets. Your older neighborhoods are going to be the target. Remember, the lead and copper rule, as we do inspections today, started in 1988. So what we know is that from 1988, we can take all of those, they were inspected, they met the lead and copper rule, we know they're okay. So that's going to exclude them from this funding, okay? And I'm going to get into specific funding here in just a few minutes. So that will target that we will have to have a funding plan in that 10-year window. We don't have it yet, but we will. That'll be in the CIP. That will come forward in the capital improvements plan that we have coming, okay? How does that look? So the easy way out for an operator, a city, is to raise rates and say the EPA made me do it, right? I hope I'm of value to you and your community because this is my specialty, funding these infrastructure projects. You may not know this, but over the last 15 years, I have gotten a little over 180 million out of the Texas Water Development Board back into this community. That means tax money that you spent to the state of Texas came back into the community. And that's what the plan is to do this. So you may have seen last year that we had a wastewater plant that has trouble. Minimum estimate on that's 300 million. Our initial estimate on this main replacement is about 150 million. I'm going to retire one day. But my plan right now is to retire when I have both of those funded. That's my plan. I can't give you a date, but my goal is to fund those and have that go. Because historically, you've heard, we're going to have a target for North Heights, we're going to have a target for East Ridge, we're going to have a target for this. The problem is, when you get into the local budget, it always competes, right? And then it gets put off. It's time to stop. And that's my pledge to you. Now, I may have to retire without meeting that goal, but I hope not. So here's some things how that looks. How does that actually look? I mean, we talk in, that's a lot of money, folks. And guess what you'll see when it's done? Nothing, because it's all buried. But you'll have better water. So where are we at? I've heard the stories about fire hydrants not having pressure. I've heard the low pressures. We go check those. We'll go on any pressure complaint at any house, and we'll pull that meter, we'll put a flush on it, and we'll make sure that water is meeting the minimum standards of 20 PSI, 35 PSI. And we do that. And we haven't found anything up there that hasn't met that requirement. okay? The fire hydrant, I work with the fire department frequently to make sure that they have the coverage they need, even though some of those hydrants don't flow what they do normally in the Southwest. However, a number of those hydrants, again, if I turn on my computer and had a screen, I would click on that hydrant and I can show you some that flow 1,000 gallons a minute, which is a very good hydrant. Some don't. Same applies to the Southwest, where it was built to do that. So if there was a scenario where the fire department doesn't have the water, that'll be addressed immediately. We have an E&I fund that we do that immediately. We haven't found any of those, okay? We need enhanced participation in infill development. You'll hear me say that in budget. Infill development is what would impact your old neighborhoods. That you need to participate in your community plans, North Heights plans, East Ridge plans. Officials, the understanding of how important this is. I just can't say enough for the neighborhood plan and how it's elevated the ability to have a voice in the local government for issues related to the neighborhoods. Now remember, I live in a world of infrastructure. When I ran the Potter County Wellfield project in 2010 and 11, I was a project manager. I was an assistant city manager, but that's the highlight of my career, the $86 million addition of water supply, such that this city could grow and thrive. Okay? That project was in that state water plan was in the 2030s. We had to move it up. I had to go to the state. I had to move that thing up in the plan because we were running out of water. We got that thing done. We got them to identify it. We got that $86 million at about 1% interest. That rolls off in 2029. The debt for that $86 million will be paid off for that well field in 2029. Why is that important? So this 2 years from October is what? 2026. We've got to fund $150 million of main replacement and a wastewater plant in that same window. Do you think you can take $86 million, reissue that debt, and not have to raise rates to have $86 million to do one or the other? And right now, my funding plan, James, specifically for you, is that $86 million is targeted to main replacement, including the North Heights. And if we can maintain the system such that we don't have these major disasters, then that $86 million will be able to roll right back in. Guess what that does for all of you in this room? It does it without a rate increase. Because you take the same rate you funded it first, you just continue that same rate and you go. When's the last time you heard a specific plan of a funding plan? That's what we're developing. Because if I don't develop that funding plan, and I don't go to the state of Texas, and I don't go to the EPA and the feds and get the money, I know you don't like the EPA, but if they're going to give me a check, I'm going to like it, okay? But that's how this is going to work. It's the only way I see to work without one other option. The only other option is to say 10% rate increases every time to pay for this. Jesse's seen that happen. And we don't want that path. So we have to have a logical, reasonable path. And it starts with a funding plan, okay? And I have to meet that funding plan. And if I don't have that and I don't do that, I'll just be the next generation that said we need to do it and never get it done. So that's why the Potter County oil field, that's why my history is. And that's why me being a member of that committee, Region A water planning, guess what that does for us? That identifies those projects and puts it eligible for all those state and federal funding. Isn't it about time we got some of that federal funding back in this community? That's the answer, not local. Let's not fund this off local rate increases. Let's fund this off of the taxes we already pay in another area. Now, that doesn't always make me the most popular guy. Okay? Why? Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, El Paso, they want that money. There's this guy from Amarillo in their way. That's my job. That's what I do. Okay? I do a few other things, but that's one of the things I'm proud of what I do for Amarillo. Okay? But what does that mean? That means I need the community to understand and stick with me. Why would you do it after generation of lack of follow through, right? So, 2 minutes. Wow, I need 40. So this last 2 minutes, I can make this in 2 minutes. One of the biggest problems other than water that we've discussed was sewer odor. Okay? Many of you talked to me about that. We took an effort, we made something happen, and I think it's made it better. It hasn't fixed it perfectly, but it's made it better. For those of you who don't know, we put a positive suction sewer odor control unit right on the south side of Thompson Park, and it's fenced. And it's improved the neighborhood. And all I can tell you is that's my commitment with this city council and the current staff's commitment to do something in the North Heights. That's how many years was that a problem and nobody did anything? We did something. 68. Okay? All I can tell you, I don't expect full trust. I expect the same old hard questions to be asked. But I will tell you, we've done something. I can point to what we've done, and we're going to continue doing it to help those neighborhoods. Okay? And we're going to do it without stopping growth in this city. A thriving city also grows. So we have to have addition of jobs. We have to have the growth of our economy. And we have to do this all at the same time. And it's a very complex thing. And yes, it comes with criticism. I think most everybody I know has had some criticism of me of some kind in the past. Guess what? Mildred, I think you'll criticize me in the future a time or two. But that's the way we're going to get there. I'm going to accept that criticism and we're going to go to work. Okay? Next phase.
Okay, at this point, we're going to open it up to our panel discussion. And just before we get started, how can we ensure that Potter Randall, PROD isn't going to increase, the taxes once all this is taken care of?
You're talking about Potter Randall Appraisal District?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's going to be something that I'm sure we need to keep track of, because I don't think that folks should have to be punished for it being better. And then, they've been paying for so long into the system for the entire city, then to raise their taxes on that, to me, would be not a good thing. So do you know anything on that aspect?
Yeah, well, obviously, I will just challenge you that, you're going to get Alex, you're going to get the same answer as always, but I'll expand a little on it. The Potter Randall Appraisal District is a separate entity. However, the local government entities fund them. So they technically are a part of us. Okay. Now, they operate on their own under their own board direction and under their own state law. Okay. So how do you ensure equity in PRAD? They have the appeals process, and if you're not using that appeals that you get when you get your notifications, you're missing out on your chance at equity. Okay. How do you get equity between improvements in a neighborhood versus non-improvements in a neighborhood? The legislature has kind of helped you on that. The Texas State Legislature has helped you on that, because whether it's the property increase or the rate increase, you're limited to the 3.5 before you have to go to the voter approval tax rate. So that used to be 8%. So that has helped you. So let's just say your property value doubled because something happened, well, your tax rate has to go down to match on the general terms, not individual. That's why the appeals process is so important to the PRAD system. Okay? You need further detail, or is that?
That's fine. So what we're going to do is Question will be asked, and you'll have 2 minutes to respond. That way we can get enough questions in. So,
Okay.
Mildred and Jesse and Mr. Allen and Commissioner Coble, that's kind of who we have on our historic data panel to be able to ask the questions pertaining to what's been going on over the course of the last several decades, maybe longer than that. Who would like to go first? Mr. Allen?
Mine was about historic.
Okay.
Well, first of all, thank you for coming. I do have one question. Knowing that this affects North Heights or University Heights, I really have one question, and it's, why didn't you reach out to the community that this affects, knowing that the people that are concerned about this, that you're holding, that you're coming to a meeting to discuss water that impacts another community? Why didn't you or from someone under in your staff reach out to some of the elected officials that represent that community or some of your neighborhood group? Why didn't you reach out to them and say, hey, I'm going to be talking about a 10-year plan that affects your community. Can you mobilize and come to this meeting and listen to that? I mean, to me, it's very disrespectful to the community that you would be talking about something that affects them and not even bother to let them know about.
Thank you, James. So, yes, there's always the opportunity for us as public officials to do a better job. I won't argue with you, James. There's an opportunity for us to do better. However, from my perspective, I was invited by a community group with a topic, and I responded in a positive, affirmative way. Okay? Now, should I have the knowledge that there's more involved in the North Heights than just this group? Obviously, I know that. But I also felt like that this community group was well known enough that it was out there. I did receive a few calls. I tried to return some of those calls. I will tell you, I've been to many community group meetings, and I've been in the North Heights invited by those groups. Many of you have been in attendance to those meetings. So it's an ongoing effort. And if it is offensive, the way I conducted myself, James, I apologize to you in the neighborhood. I want you to know I'm working on that. I think the citizens deserve public officials that are responsive. I believe in customer service, and obviously I didn't do a good enough job in this area. Promise to do better.
I guess I'm next. As we know, this fees that are charged on our water bill, which is 4 different fees that are charged in the water bill, as we call it the water bill. That's an enterprise fund on all those 4 different agencies: the drainage fee, the sewage system, the water, and the solid waste. Those are at a 3/4 inch meter, cost $68 a month for me personally. Now, I don't know if other people know the details of this meter, but at the same time, if the enterprise money is set aside for the maintenance of the facility, I have good water pressure at my location in South Amarillo, and I go to places in North Heights, and those people are paying the same amount of money that I'm paying, and you're saying 20 pounds per inch is what is acceptable.
The minimum.
Yeah, the minimum. Now, I've witnessed in certain homes in that area where the pressure didn't seem adequate compared to what I have in South Amarillo. So I was curious why we spent $1.5 million to develop the infrastructure around Hodgetown. That's enterprise money. That was $1.5 million to develop that restructure around the Hodgetown. And that could have been $1.5 million dedicated to North Heights because they've been paying water bills into the enterprise fund. Yet we took enterprise money to develop the $1.5 million to develop Hodgetown infrastructure. I have a problem with that kind of logic in government, that we have bill players paying into the system, have an adequate supply, but we develop another section of the city for the entertainment industry. And that's curious to me, is how these people can have some representation in the application of their enterprise money.
Great question. So, can you imagine a staff member who's trying to fight the battle too, and some elected official sets a priority, that's different.
That's my problem.
We are a political organization. So there's a couple of answers to your questions. Your vote's important, okay? So all the way back to some votes that some people elected, some people that focused on Hodgetown. That becomes a priority, okay? From that elected official. The city staff has to implement the policy of the elected officials. And that comes into play. So is it we want that kind of growth in the city? Do we want housing growth? Do we want to replace? These are goals and objectives that we bring forward. Impact that. Each and every one of you can have the biggest impact of that, and you know this is true if you attend the budget sessions.
Right.
It's about setting the goals and objectives with those elected officials during the budget discussions. Whatever day, if you'll watch those postings for that, there'll be a specific time for each of those enterprise funds. And there'll be discussions about how much that fund is going into what. I can tell you, under the current elected officials, I'm really happy that those types of things aren't being proposed. Now, we're finishing some of those that were approved for different reasons from previous administrations and actually debt issued. You'll see some drainage improvements downtown that are related to debt issuance that the previous council debt issued. We can't stop that because it's dedicated to that improvement, okay? But going forward, that is a decision of this, a policy decision of this council. And in my opinion, you're seeing it much more applicable to where the challenges are. Did that answer your question?
Well, it does answer my question, but how can these people represent themselves to bring their agenda more up to the front of the council when they make these corporate decisions that you have to address?
Okay, first off, vote. Second off, attend the budget hearing and express your opinions at the council level. That number one impact would be come to the budget hearings that are conducted during the summer and express opinion that we need to focus on old infrastructure. Because you'll hear me say it during the budget, we need to allocate, I've got a goal set in my budgeting process for utilities of $15 million a year in available cash capital to address ongoing urgent needs and main replacement programs. You'll hear that talked about in the budget. I was asked earlier tonight if it's in the budget. It's not in the budget I'm proposing, but it's going to be discussed about should this be a priority versus some of the other things we're doing. And we'll ask the council and we'll get direction. Once they give us direction, that's what will happen. So attending the budget hearings is the biggest impact you can have.
So with all due respect, I'd have to say that, I mean, it's only obvious that the North Heights has been dilapidated for the last, several decades. I mean, how can they not implement that in the budget with some foresight? I just don't understand.
Okay. Well, let me address that. I can do that quickly, Alex.
Yes, sir.
So I say it this way. I like to take the railroad tracks going this way. And you take a spectrum around the city and you get all the way around to I-27. That statement applies to that whole area of the city. There's not an area of the city that I'm aware of that is fully developed. Another thing that we did for the North Heights that was critical, part of that odor problem was because that sewer system was overloaded. This northeast interceptor allows that overload to be addressed and not more load to be put in it. So we're doing some huge things to affect the community, but that affects the whole east side of Amarillo, from that railroad track all the way to I-27. That's a positive impact for that. So again, once you do it, it's buried, you don't see it. So.
Okay, I'm just Warren G. Coble tonight, just citizen. You and I have been working on the odor complaint, but everyone does not understand it's not just odor. It's H2S gas, which it can be lethal.
Oh, that is lethal.
It attacks your nervous system. There's been some things done, but Commissioner Vaughn and I ran around the other day, and doesn't seem to be any better. It seems to not only come up on 24th, but now it's on 15th and Adams, and then it's actually up behind somebody's home over there in the same area. And so my concern now is that I'm trying to be patient, I'm learning patience, but I don't want any of the people in the community to have to be a patient in the hospital if I keep being patient. This thing really needs to be resolved. And you had a little burp here not too long ago out in Georgia somewhere, and it affected the area. They had everybody, G.I. Joe and everybody trying to take care of that. And all I'm asking is, we're talking about safety and wellness. I want to know something other than be patient. Help me out.
Okay. So the odor control unit that we put in actually reduces and the bacteria in that. It's a positive pressure, and pulls it through a media, and that actually gets rid of the H2S. And the tests show that we're able to reduce that. There will be plans to put in others as we test that system and see where it goes. But it's an ongoing, I know we've talked about
But it's
patients,
before,
but
I'm talking about odors now, before
okay.
the apparatus that you put in.
Now,
Further south.
And I'm going, that's what I'm addressing. So I've told you all along, Warren, and yes, all of you, I can take you out and show you. This is a step-by-step process. Because that overloaded line that I talked about, when the water hits the top, where does that air and gas go? It goes out. So not only is it these odor control units, we have to put in a pipeline. So that pipeline, we're going to upsize the one down on Arroyo to get more volume away from that community. And if we can lower the water in that pipeline, again, we don't add more. That's what's been happening for generation after generation, just putting more in that same pipeline. That northeast interceptor that's going out, you can drive by back northeast of the prisons and you can see that pipe going in the ground. But that project is essential that we have room and those capacity issues. So once it'll be the odor control unit, it'll be the pipeline, it'll be another odor control unit, it'll be another pipeline, step at a time, we'll get that where it works. So I understand, but until we have the time to put those in, we're gonna struggle. In the meantime, we're not leaving it hanging to dry with no answer. So up on 34th, at 34th, right west of Western is the water pump station. Y'all may have driven by it. West of Western on 34th, on the north side. Over in the far corner, you'll see a chain link fence, and you'll see a chemical tank in there. So we buy chemical. It's from the iron industry. It's called ferrous. It's a ferrous chemical. That's iron. That iron will adhere to that H2S gas, put it back in the water, and take it to the wastewater plant. So we have enhanced those treatment processes along with that to address, in the meantime, keep as much inside the water as we can instead of that gas escaping. So there's multiple fronts that we're working on to address that issue, and it'll continue, and it'll only enhance with our budgeting process. So yes, Warren, it's not gonna like flipping a switch and turning it over, but we're doing multiple things, and I'll be glad to show those too.
For another question, you mentioned that you have $15 million that you put into CIP that you're going to present to the board, to the council, excuse me, for emergency use in this upcoming.
For the more urgent needs that are identified.
Excuse me, more urgent. You didn't consider anything in North Heights this year because of funding. Let me finish. Because of funding, if you said, correct?
Say it.
You did not consider anything in the CIP this year because of funding, lack of funding, correct?
We have nothing identified for
Because
construction.
of lack of funding.
Yes.
Do you have anything in your plan that you haven't shown us, since you didn't show us anything in your 10-year plan? Do you have anything in your plan detailed for, say, $5 or $6 million? A project
Not
off the
a,
top of your head?
not a specific project for that amount. We have some engineering designs
Could you
identified.
find something for $5 or $6 million?
It is possible.
Okay, then I would like to make a suggestion to the group, since although our interim city manager doesn't think anything's urgent in North Heights, and I'm not a greedy person, but I think since the city for the last 60 years hasn't been able to find funding, I would like for everyone in this room to contact your sphere of influence. We need to contact every city council person, have your friends contact every city council person, and urge them to use these urgent funds, $5 or $6 or $7 million of these urgent funds, recommend that they use those this year. And that Mr. Hartman's department find an urgent project that's been neglected for the last 60 or 70 years in North Heights, and they engineer it and get it done as quickly as possible. And if we have to do that every year until he gets funding from the state, federal government, we have to do that every year. And they'll probably do something like that. Maybe that's what we have to do, is attack it that way. That's gonna be my suggestion. And since they can't find the funding, we'll just have to help them find the funding.
So part of the urgency that we have, y'all seen the Hollywood Road issue at the plant. The structure is undermined out of the flooding from last year. And so we are under state regulations to bring that into compliance. And that makes that an urgent need.
We're under 70 years of neglect in North Heights for urgent need.
I understand.
So I'm concerned about Sonsi in Hollywood. I'm concerned about that you can't find funding for North Heights.
And I understand. And I respect.
I'm sorry, may I ask a question? I know I'm not in.
Sure, here you go, ma'am.
But here we were, thank you. Here we were going to spend all this money on the Civic Center. Where was that funds gonna come from?
Oh, the funding that Mr. Furman talked about was spent.
No, with the
Oh,
funding you
for
were gonna
the
use
Civic Center, that was gonna come from, the Civic Center itself was gonna come from, if you're, excuse me, I'm not supposed to say the tax notes. And remember, the court found that not acceptable.
Oh, okay, but we were gonna do that, but yet we weren't gonna take care of our people.
Well,
I mean,
again,
I wanna make sure and understand that. I'm new to all of this that's going on. And the fact that we were willing to do that and not take care of these people who have been suffering for a very long time.
Right.
That's a huge concern.
Yes.
And it, not just for their area, they are our people too. This is a citywide issue.
yes. Yes. And that's why I've identified it as a citywide issue.
Mr. Hartman, I just am trying to wrap my head around the 10-year plan.
Okay.
Okay? What I understand, if I understand it correctly, is that you're waiting on October to trigger a response to the EPA, another 2 years to respond to the EPA, to be forced into a position where you're forced to replace the lines over here, and that they're going to be sending the city the money. Is that?
I'm gonna request the money.
Okay. So here's where I'm going with this. In a community back where I'm from, we had to separate the stormwater from the sewer because the stormwater was overflowing the city sewer system when we had a heavy flow. We had a new city planner come in, and this young lady was able to get federal grant money, state money, which supplemented the city funds to the point where it altogether almost eliminated the city's budget. In other words, the impact on the budget. What I'd like to know is what the city is doing in terms of applying for federal money, state money right now, okay? And this gentleman makes a good point. There's things that, you're looking at an immediate need over here in North Heights. Now, I'm not part of it, and some of this is new to me, but I'm sitting here looking at a situation where there's an immediate pressing need. And if the city isn't addressing it now, and they have not historically addressed it, when do they intend to address it other than this 10-year plan? Why can't, and this gentleman makes a valid point, there's no reason that the city can't get ahead of the game and start getting these projects rolling right now through the use of funds available now and applying for grants to keep these projects moving on an immediate basis. And not only that, one final comment, if you're not familiar with H2S, I worked in the oil fields, folks, and I'm gonna tell you what, you got minutes. You don't have much time. When you're exposed to H2S, it shuts down your lungs and you can't breathe. And when you're up on top of an oil tank and you're trying to get that, upwind from that stuff, you've got minutes to run your butt down the oil field to get out of it. And if this, and there you go. And you don't have flags telling you the direction of the wind out there. So, Mr. Hartman, being new to this and just listening here, it seems to me that the city has neglected this part of the town. This gentleman makes a good point, and not only that, given the information that you've provided, sir, my calls wouldn't be to the people of influence here in the city. My calls would be to the federal government and the EPA to let them know that the community is exposed to H2S out there. Now, you want to light a fire under him? You call the EPA.
So just for awareness, there's H2S in the entire sewer system across the entire city.
If it's exposed, Floyd, no, that is dangerous.
So you're saying it's not dangerous on the south side of town, it is dangerous on the north side?
If it exists all around the city,
It does.
then you've got a problem.
I've got the same problem every sewer system in the
Doesn't
city.
matter if H2S is lethal, and if that's the case, and if I'm being exposed to it, my next call this week is gonna be to the EPA.
So the testing standards that we have show minimal amounts outside the manholes. Inside the manholes, they're very high, and Mr. Coble, we've been there, but that same thing applies across the city.
So what's gonna prevent some kids that are playing around on the streets to decide to go do some exploring down the manholes and get exposed to this, and they're dead? What then?
We have the issue and we're working with it, but by the way, the EPA is looking at this issue, so it's on their radar.
You got fired.
July
You got
23rd, 2022, we're having a bicycle thing through the community. Chief of Police was there, Alfonso Vaughn, Linda Vaughn, Gary Maxwell, Free Powell, myself, Melody was there, and this odor came through. Now, I had been told about the odor, but I never smelled it. But when this odor came from in front of the golf course, now I'm on the south side of the park, which is 19th. And that's when I discovered it was H2S. And so, had we been near the cover, though, really, someone probably would have gone down because it was that powerful coming that far. And like I said, I can't think of the name of that street up there, but there's one right by a lady's back gate. And it's not Soteris, but in that area. And it's really bad. It's, somebody needs to come check on that again. But more and more people are calling me every day. In fact, we took some letters to the mayor some time ago.
And Mr. Coble, we'll go check those. We just need to know the location. We do test, we do monitor, and we monitor for safe levels. There's you can look at the SDS sheets, the safety data sheets, and find the safe levels of methane and the other gases. There's many things that cause odor in a wastewater. There's a question.
We have one last question. It's already after 8, so I'm gonna let Mr. Reese ask his question.
Okay.
I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight, and immediately after this response from Mr. Hartman. You guys are more than welcome to the fellowship, and maybe pick this brain a little bit afterwards with Mr. Reese with it.
It seems like it's more of a statement. It seems like it's more of a Band-Aid because you keep saying minimal standards, and we're looking for a standard of excellence, and we're not getting that. I mean, you go to church, you go to your church, and some people can't stand the smell, so they have to leave. And it's supposed to get better, but it hasn't. You go to church right there off of right there off the boulevard, to Pastor Brown's church. His church has the worst of it all, and it's still there from years and years. Even though you put the thing in, it's still super bad there. And it seems like you just keep saying, well, we're doing the minimal. We're doing the minimal what EPA wants us to do, but why not more? Like, why not more?
Well, none of this was mandated by the EPA. This is a city initiative. So yes, we're looking at opportunities. We're testing to see, especially if more of these positive pressure devices, more treatment with the chemical treatments, and more pipeline replacements will have a positive. Understanding that the funding for sewer pipeline replacements competes with the funding for water main replacements.
But have you, what this gentleman just said, have you tried to go after more federal money on the opposite side?
We have two individuals who now almost full-time look and apply for grants. We have looked at the Bureau of Reclamation for opportunities that never have existed with the city. We are continuing to look at the Texas Water Development Board. I had meetings with national officials with the WIFIA program out of the EPA for funding. We continue to look and have meetings to look for opportunities. Remember, every community out there is doing it, so it's a competitive process, but we do plan to have success on it. Where in the past, those efforts were not out there. And we also have a consultant, the Normandy Group, who's helping us watch for and look for grant opportunities, especially related to water and sewer. And we have a weekly meeting that I attend with them talking about grants and opportunities, which never existed before this past year.
So none of the
So we're aggressively looking for those opportunities.
So none of that ARPA money or government money could have worked towards this? None of that ARPA money and all that stuff, none of that could have worked towards all that money that came and we gave to Mr. Chancellor and everybody else?
Some of that funding was eligible for infrastructure. Again, you had elected officials at the time that were identifying those goals and objectives. So it's not always a staff decision of where those kind of funds went.
Okay, so there's a gentleman here tonight that his name is John Adair. He got a letter about a 10-year plan. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? And then we'll close after that because I just seen you a little while ago.
Yeah, if you want me to.
Yeah, go ahead.
My main concern is, because you said something about 2 years and 2 years, and then we'll start the 10-year plan. Are we at minimum 4 years away from getting funding before you can start the 10-year plan?
In my opinion, no. October, we have to have that first step. 2 years later, we have to move to the construction.
Okay.
So 3 years at the most.
Okay, because kind of like I told Alex, a lot of times, like in my case, hey, it's put on a 5-year or 10-year plan, means shut up and go away. And what I'm referring to is the 3rd Street drainage. I bought property on the 3rd Street drainage, like right where 3rd and the Hughes overpass is.
Okay.
There's a drainage that comes out from under that, and there's a head wall. And 1,200 feet of that drainage is the city's responsibility. And I brought this land in, I think, 2002 or 3, and fought with them daily until 2008, when I was told, it's put on a 5-year plan, don't worry about it, we're going to do this, and we're going to spend X amount of money. And to this day, not a single city employee has ever been back on that property.
So drainage utility is separate from the water and the potable water system. So that utility was created in 2012. So it was part of the general fund. It competed with fire, police, libraries, everything else up until 2012. And then you have that was the implementation and creation of the drainage utility system, which is a fee-based system, enterprise, right, Jesse? It's a fee-based. And so that created its own entity. when it was created, we had, I don't recall the exact amount, but about $1.50 per house per month. Where the identified projects, including that one, were well over $1 billion. And we were funding about $1.5 million a year to address $1 billion need. So that's exactly the scenario that I say has been occurring. That's the history of these poor neighborhoods, is that there's never been a funding source. So even though they promised to put it in a 5-year plan, the funding never came to fruition because it went to other things. And I don't know what those were at the time. Then typically it goes to fire, police, libraries, those types of things. So that's the scenario. And some of you, Jesse was involved. We did a whole Partners for Development Progress assessment of this problem. And we went through about 1.5 year assessment with community meetings. And one of the things was how much infrastructure was just put off for future generations to deal with. And that's what this whole discussion tonight is about. How do we address all these infrastructure needs, and how do we get a funding source? Okay.
Can you give us a target date on when we can see something occur, like Mr. Allen was speaking about a little earlier? Are you able to give any kind of a target date so we can have a follow-up and see how we're looking?
I'd have to get with staff to get some estimates, like on the next odor control unit. I can get that in the works and then planned, because that's something that can be budgeted within what we call that E&I, extension and improvements, with addresses really urgent things. And that's within that realm.
So when does the 10-year plan officially start? Is it gonna start 25, 20,
well,
October of this year?
The construction, as the EPA schedule is October of 2026. The construction will start. That's construction. Now remember, it takes about 1.5 years to design these major projects anyway. So we'll have to start design on some of these early.
So I'll get with Mr. Allen.
Yeah.
And
you'll see some engineering design contracts or projects designed by internal staff.
I would love to do a follow-up, meeting with you. It doesn't have to be here. We need to do it over there. It's fine. It's great, but I don't have to host it. I just want it to get done. And like I said earlier at the very beginning of this meeting, this is Community Connect.
Yes.
And we're all Amarillo citizens, and we've been paying a lot into the infrastructure as well on our side of town and other sides of town. And we really need to make sure that every side of town is taken care of. And so I don't want you to feel like this was some type of setup or trap or anything like that. I think you.
And I don't. I thank you for the opportunity to be here.
And I really appreciate everyone coming out tonight. You're more than welcome to fellowship with one another, and we love you guys, and we stand strong for Amarillo all together, and thank you all for coming out tonight.
No, thank you, and I appreciate the invitation. Okay. Yes.